Okay, it is 7:04. Thank you again so much for joining me for the sex intimacy validation and the emotional consequence talk. This talk I felt was extremely necessary and needed just for various different reasons. The more we begin to awaken and come into the wholeness and fullness of ourselves, we cannot negate our sexuality and our sensuality. And with that, there can come some hiccups because initially we aren't taught when it comes to sexual interaction. We're taught about, the safe sex, and we're taught about if you were brought up in a religious household, that you wait till you're married in order to engage in sexual activity. But no one talks about the emotional aspect of the act of engaging in sex. And not to mention, I myself have had a very interesting experience just having that mindset of utilizing sex or intimacy to validate someone's commitment or truth or acceptance of me. That is one of the, key words I will actually use there is acceptance, because that, for me, that was the reality or the truth of my particular experience with this mindset. Now, normally how normally I usually have these calls run is I do some teaching, and at the end of the teaching or just sharing of some information, then I'll do like a brief Q&A. But for this particular one, and normally I do have a co-host, Cal, but she is in the pursuit of her second master's, so she is kind of swamped. So tonight I will be running the S.H.E Speaks call tonight, which is cool because this is an exciting topic for me. And I did it a little bit different, for those that actually chimed in on some of the posts that some of the questions that I posted on the page. And one of the questions or requests was for you ladies to actually submit some questions that you may have in regards of this subject. Because, of course, sex isn't just a physical act. Sex is the physical act, it's the mental, it's the emotional, and for those of us that take it a step further, it is a spiritual, act. But again, we're only taught, and we're not, in my opinion, we're not even fully taught the fullness of the physical act. So I really wanted to hear what you all have to say in regards of the subject. So I had ladies posting on the page. I had ladies hitting my inbox. I even had some ladies texting me for the ones that have my personal number. And the questions were really amazing. So I'm gonna do a little differently, where I'm gonna start with one of the questions, and then I will get into my personal experience with the mindset, and then we will just allow the call to unfold as it will. I'm a huge advocate of flowing with the direction in which energy leads us. So one of the first questions, and again, I know who sent me these questions, but of course I'm going to ask them anonymously, due honor privacy. So one of the first questions that I got was, Why is it women are more emotionally attached after sex versus men? That is a very great question. It is a great question. It is a question that I think most of us women have pondered this question in our minds for years. And it's not until, certain scientific experiments were able to be done that we are able to take a look inside of the brain after sex to see what happens and, what's going on, what's the comparison between men and women. And during my research to answer this question, it was really, really interesting because what it really boils down to is the hormone and the potency of the hormone that orgasm produces. We produce the same hormones that men produce, but we produce them in greater amounts. And the theory is we produce them in greater amounts because our orgasms are longer than men. So logically, that makes sense, right? And then I went on to, kind of research some more, and it says that when the oxytocin, because that's one of the main key players in the feel-good pleasure arena of humans, if we ever are doing something and that something produces us to feel good, and it's pleasurable to us, then we have oxytocin secreting in our brains. So that's one of the key player hormones that actually is responsible for us feeling emotional, right? And then when I went on to further research it, they've dubbed oxytocin as the cuddle hormone because it really makes you feel like you have this connection with the person that you just engaged in the sex act, in the act of sex with, and you want to be close to them and you want to learn more about them. So the oxytocin is actually what produces that connection and wanting to be closer. Now, something that I found also, and it's still all theory-based for the most part because even scientists really don't have this hammered out in black and white because that's just how complex the human body can actually be. They theorize that the oxytocin actually can last up to 3 weeks within our bodies. And that is what is responsible for that heightened sense of connection, if you will. And that is the basis of us developing an emotional attachment to whoever we just, again, engage in that sex act with. Now, for men, because men are wired a little differently, it does not mean that they don't experience the same type of reaction that the hormone releases. They just experience it on they just experience it to a lesser degree, if you will. They just experience it again on a lesser degree. So the odds of them developing an emotional attachment is actually less because of the amount that's secreted and then for the length of time that it's secreted, okay? So that's like the scientific part. But the whole purpose of this call is to look at the validation from a self-love perspective. Because when we seek validation, that can signify, and most times it does signify, that there is an element of self-love that is missing. There's an element of the concepts of self that are missing. The concepts of self-awareness, self-worth, and self-value. Whenever we seek validation, one of those is missing altogether, or it's not as strong as it could be. So that is the purpose of this call, is to look at it from a self-love perspective. Because if those concepts were present, then we wouldn't need to be validated, because we would validate ourselves. And when we use something as powerful as sex as a tool of validation, it puts us on a path of forever seeking, and it takes its toll on us as a whole person, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, and then again spiritually, because we do utilize energy every time we engage in a sexual act. And just like everything in existence, it's a universal law of ebb and flow. There should be an exchange during the act of sex as well. Just as you're giving, your partner should be giving to you. So when we are utilizing sex, we're just constantly spinning ourselves. And we're constantly spinning because we are in a state of looking. And if we're not finding it with this person, then we're going to look to this person to try to find what it is that we don't have within ourselves. One of those, again, concepts of self is actually not present, or it is not as strong as it should be. Or, as it was in my case, the root cause of my experience with this mindset was because it was something that was taught. It was a learned behavior. It was something that I experienced growing up. It was a visual lesson that didn't get the verbal correction behind it, if that makes sense. Many times as parents, we know that we lead by example. Most times our examples are all are all visual. They don't lack, they don't have the verbal accommodation to go with it. So when we're teaching and we're being an example to our children and everything is visual, if you are doing something that has the potential to unfold itself in your child's mind in a negative light, and we don't go back and correct it or balance it out, then it's left to manifest in whichever way it chooses based upon your child's experiences. So for the sister that just chimed in, I'm going to ask you to put your phone on mute. Thank you so much. So, again, for me, my experience with this validation mindset was something that I learned growing up. It was something that I watched one of my family members actually do. One of my family members, the example was always to have men around. Now, there was no verbal correction that came behind that. So as a child growing up witnessing that, in my mind, it taught me that I am to always have a man around. And having that man around, somehow that translated to sex is how I keep him around. And that sex is what validated my acceptance to him. That actually contributed greatly to the path that I was actually on of my severe depression and suicidal tendencies, which I walked that path for 14 years. And this mindset of validation further supported that mindset because the element of self was not there. The element of self-love, the element of self-preservation just was not there. The element of self-boundaries just was not there because they were not taught. So after this, journey, 14 years of severe depression and suicidal tendencies, and I began to come out of that, then that's when I began to actually learn the lessons of self-love and, validating yourself. So one of the things that I actually did was I actually looked up the word validation, which I'm sure all of us know it, but but there are just some really key words that stick out in this definition, and it's to make valid or confirm, to make true or factual, or to be accepted. So that is a horrible and a form of torment, a form of self-torment, and a form of suffering, to be in the mindset of I am only validated when this is happening. I am only validated, or I only feel accepted when sex is happening between us. I only feel accepted when he's touching me. Now, understand that in a healthy relationship where that universal exchange of ebb and flow is actually happening, then those actions, they transform from validation to support. It switches from a quote-unquote negative light to a positive light. And that can only happen, I don't want to use the word only, but that happens when, again, you have two people that are, I'm going to use this word, emotionally intelligent. When you're emotionally intelligent, that means that you have an awareness of what your emotions are, how they affect you, how they can affect you, and how they are affected by other people. That's emotional intelligence, and that's what's not taught. Many of us women, we get the tag of being super emotional. There's nothing wrong with being emotional if it's balanced. Most times we are operating out of an imbalanced state of emotions. So that's why we continue to get the tag of, oh my gosh, you're so emotional. But everyone has emotions, because emotions are simply an indicator of something that's going on and that we need to pay attention to. That's really all that emotions are. When we're sad, then that means that whatever just happened, whatever just took place, is affecting us in a way that's bringing us down. It's the exact same thing with anger, with fear. Emotions are simply indicators. And when we step into the arena of emotional intelligence, that teaches us how to observe the emotion first before allowing ourselves to go into the emotion or become the emotion, if that makes sense. I'll get back to that in just a minute. Now, I'm going to a next question. One of the questions is, how do you get over someone that you're not in a relationship with, but you still have sex with? Excuse me. Well, here's the thing with that. If your aim is to get over someone, but you're still sexually intertwining yourselves, you're in a losing battle. Because sex solidifies the emotions. If the emotions are still there, you're tied to the experience. If the experience is still there, then that's your reality. See, that is something that, again, we haven't taken a look at. We haven't taken a look at what really drives human action. And what drives human action, I discovered, is feeling and emotion. If you can feel it, then you can act on it. If you can feel it, then you can actually heal it. That's one of the main things that when sisters come to me, I need you to feel it, not become it, but feel it so that we can address it. Most times people get into the habit of suppressing, and they think that that is the way to go, and it's not. Because what's going to happen is something is going to come along that looks like whatever it is that you're suppressing, and you're going to snap off in the same energy that you had when that experience happened. So, going back to the question, if you are in a relationship, if you're trying to get over somebody that you're no longer in a relationship with, but you still have sex with them, then it sounds like there needs to be a decision. Either you're going to be in a relationship with this person or you're not. And if you're choosing, based upon this question, to not be in a relationship, then that needs to also include the sexual encounters with this person. Then it sounds like there needs to be some self-boundaries that are developed and enforced. Once you do that, then you can begin to work on detaching from the experience. And some people say, no, that's not possible. Yes, it is. That was the very first thing that I learned when coming out of my 14 years of severe depression and suicidal tendencies, is the universal law of detachment. That law basically teaches you how to step away from the experience to see it, and it allows you to be in control of the experience versus the experience controlling you. That's what the universal law of detachment in its simplicity is. It allows you to step away from what it is that you are experiencing or a thought that keeps reoccurring, allow you to look at it, and then it allows you to be in control of it versus it in control of you. It sounds like a lot, and it can be, but it is a lifesaver, hands down. It's one of the things in some measure that I always introduce to women that come to me. Especially if you're trying to detach from something, it's not possible to detach. It's not effective, I should say. It's not as effective to try to detach from something and you're still in it. It is more challenging, and because the emotional intelligence isn't there, then the odds of you coming out of it are really, really slim. So, the answer to that question, 1, you need to make a decision. If you want to be in a relationship, then be in a relationship. If you don't, then you need to, then the decision is not to be in a relationship, which includes the sexual encounters. Once that is done, once the decision is made, then you can begin to make and enforce self-boundaries. And once those self-boundaries are done, those are done in conjunction with learning how to step away from it, to detach from the feeling, because it's the feeling that keeps pulling you back to have that encounter with this person. Every time you think of this person, you may instantly think about the times in which you all are intimate or you all are engaged in active sex. That's because you're still attached to the feeling. that's produced. If you detach from the feeling, you can deal with what it is that's at hand, and that's not being in a relationship with this person. But not wanting to be in a relationship but still engaging in sex is extremely counterproductive. Okay, so we're going to move on to another question. The next question is, what is the root connection to sex and the mind? Excuse me. I'm going to switch that question just a little bit because, give me 1 second. Well, I'll leave it as is. Never mind. The connection, the root connection to sex and the mind is really dependent upon your view of what sex is and the purpose of sex. I'm inclined to believe that this question may have wanted to say, what is the root connection between sex and the brain? Because the brain and the mind are two different things. But we're going to leave it as is. What is the root connection between sex and the mind? Again, it's totally dependent upon what your view of what sex is, what it means, and what is its purpose in your life. If sex is in someone's life designated or meant to them just to strictly procreate, have children, then in their mind, their thought processes will line up with that, and it will support that whomever I'm engaging in this sex act with, this is the person that I'm going to have children with or I want to have children with. So this question is really person-specific. It's actually a really broad question, and that answer can actually can go several different ways. So just to kind of wrap that question up, it really just depends upon your personal perception of what sex is, what it means to you, and what its purpose is. Okay. I'm going to pause right here because I don't know who all is on the line. If any of the ladies that ask these questions are actually on the line, or if there are other ladies on the line that want to ask a question. Because I have two more questions, but I want to just pause right here and I want to see if any of the ladies have questions on the phone.
Do you mind explaining the difference between the brain and the mind?
Say it one more time. I'm sorry.
Could you explain the difference between the brain and the mind?
Yeah.
That last question?
Yeah. Okay. The difference between the brain and the mind is the brain is, the brain is part of our physical makeup. It is our processing center that processes the thoughts and the ideas that the mind brings forth. The mind doesn't compute or break down or make any decisions. The mind is really is equivalent or is our subconscious. So the mind is vast. It's like a vast ocean. It has no really beginning or no end. The mind is it's just a highway of thoughts. And because the interaction between the mind and the brain is so swift, people, and I once had this school of thought, people thought that the mind and the brain were the exact same thing, and it's not. The brain is a processing center, or it's likened to a computer. That's what the brain does. It files things, it remembers, and when we send the command to pull information forth, we can retrieve information from it. But the mind itself is vast. It's our subconscious. It is those things in which how do I say this without sounding confusing? It is those things that we know and we kind of don't know of yet. I really hope that really answers, because the mind, again, it is vast. It is literally summed up. It is our subconscious. It is those experiences that we have, but we may not remember them right offhand. It is the area where things are suppressed. It is those things where what somebody say will dig deep down inside. You're really digging deep into your mind, which is your subconscious. So it's not a place. It's not a designation. It just exists. If I really hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it does? Okay, great. Okay. So does anyone else have any questions?
I do. Why is it that some women feel as though that them having sex with a man is going to make that man come closer, or make that man feel as if he is deemed to be with them, when in all actuality you're just basically just giving yourself to this man and it's not changing anything?
Okay, great. Well, that goes back to it could be several different things. One, it could be a taught or a learned behavior. It could be something. I mean, and it being a taught or a learned behavior can come from several, different contributors. It could be from family, it could be from friends, it could be from media, because we know that media has a really interesting way of showing the relationship between women and sex, and women in relationships, and how sex can be utilized. So it really really just depends, again, on what that person's understanding and view of sex really is. And if they've taken on that thinking, then in essence they really may not see anything wrong with what they're doing, because it's something that has been taught to them. And if it has worked in the past, then that experience, that where it quote unquote worked, actually supports and validates that line of thinking. So it really is person specific why someone may think that sex can keep a man. That is really the best answer that I can give. That and whenever any of the self-concepts are missing, self-worth, self-validation, high self-esteem, and self-awareness, those four, whenever any of those are missing or not as strong as they should be, and they are reaching out to find some type of way to feel that or make up for what's not there, then that could also be a reason why, because sex does produce a sense of pleasure. It does produce that instant sense of gratification. So again, it really just depends on what someone's personal view is of engaging, with someone.
Okay. Good answer. I agree.
Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. Does anyone else?
Well, I do. I have one more question. Do you think the same thing that just tied into what you said, do you think that ties in with any woman who has experienced any form of sexual abuse? Does that tie in with that as well? Do you think that the validation, that they use that as steam to feel like whatever that's been taken away from them, from that sexual abuse, is what they challenge towards sexual experiences with other people?
That is an awesome question, and to a certain degree, yes, I do feel that is a expression of hurt, or it's an expression of it is an interesting way of reclaiming what was lost. Because if a woman is a victim of sexual assault, that means it was forcibly, of course, taken from her. But in her mind, if it settled in her to, now I'm going to take things back, then that for her is her way of reclaiming her own power. It's misdirected and it's misplaced, but that is how it translates to her. Because it was taken in this manner, she's going to take it back in that same manner. So to her, it looks like I'm regaining my power. But in essence, it's actually keeping that cycle of emptiness going. Because there may not have been an instance of self-healing. Because if there had been, then that mindset of I'm going to take it back through the same, way in which that it was taken from me, it would not be present.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Wow.
I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that was that's interesting. That's very interesting. That gives you something to think about. Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, that it is extremely interesting, because that goes to show some of the many ways in which every experience that we have truly is person specific. No one experiences anything the exact same. We all may be women, and I could be in a room with someone that may have walked the same road as I did with severe depression and suicidal tendencies, and wrestled with this mindset of validation through sex and intimacy. But their way of expressing it most times will be different, than mine. And so that really, again, goes to show just how careful that we should be when we're attempting to help and assist people. Nobody's role is exactly the same. Nobody will express things exactly the same. There may be some similarities, but nothing is exactly the same. And just going off of the example that I gave, that goes to show that you would think that particular woman would go in the opposite direction of utilizing sex to regain her power. But somehow it translated to her that because it was taken this way, I'm going to take it back that way. That is really truly amazing how the mind works in when it attempts to heal itself. But there has to be other factors in alignment with, self-healing. So yeah, that it is a really interesting way to look at, healing, and the ways that we can express hurt or pain, and the different ways in which we attempt to, regain our footing. It really is interesting. So do we have any other questions?
I have another question.
Sure.
It's going in what you had just said. If you do that, how would you stop that?
Okay.
That's a pattern.
Yeah. Great. The first step to addressing a pattern is, number one, is to acknowledge that a pattern exists. One, okay? And then two, after the pattern is acknowledged that it exists, then the next step after acknowledgement is we have to accept that this is where you are. And that is a big step for people because they instantly hear the word accept and they say, well, I don't want to be here. It's not accepting it to stay where you are. It's accepting that you're here and that you're in control to move from here. So the next step is you acknowledge, then you accept it, and then we do the work to get to the root of that cycle. Everything has a root cause. Someone that is expressing themselves through quote-unquote sexual aggression, I'll call it that for now, sexual aggression in reclaiming their voice, it didn't just start there. That is the effect of a cause. So we have to get to the cause. And most times it's something in someone's childhood. So we will have to do some work. We will have to have some sessions. We have to talk about some things. We will have to do some things through visualization. And we will get to that root. And we will address it at the root. And once it's addressed at the root, then the effect from that cause, the need to do the effect from that cause begins to lessen. And as it lessens more and more, we then replace it with something that's more productive and that's more supportive to where it is that you want to be. Every time you remove something, you have to replace it with something. Otherwise, the potential for it returning is great. So, I hope I answered it, and I hope that was helpful. Okay. So we are actually at 7:45, ladies. I hope everyone that had questions was able to get their questions answered and addressed. These last two questions that I did not get an opportunity to address, I will actually address them on the page. And if you want to connect with me after this call, you definitely can do that. You can either connect with me directly, which my personal line is 313-758-9040. If I don't answer, just leave me a voice message, and I will definitely get back with you. Again, it's 313-758-9040. Or if you're on Facebook, you can definitely inbox me on Facebook if that's how you found out about the talk tonight. And you can also email me. My email address is woman.arise, ARISE, @yahoo.com. So I thank you all for attending this talk. I thank you so much for the questions. I thank you for the interaction. I thank you so much for your energy. And I look forward to sharing the recording with you all. I will either post the recording on this page, or I will post it on my S.H.E Speaks page. So it is a S.H.E Speaks page with Not a Crystal, and I will most likely post the recording there. And the recording is normally up between 2 to 3 days after today. So again, thank you, ladies, so much. My hope is that the talk was helpful. It shedded some light on some questions that you may have. Again, if you want to talk more about it, if you have any more questions, or even if you want to, schedule sessions to work on something that you know that you're dealing with, that you know and need to come out of, or you want to process through, definitely contact me. Again, personal number is 313-758-9040. I thank you again, and good night to you all. Rest well, and have a pleasant rest of the week. Peace.